All right, there it goes.
Oh, well, hey, everybody. Tracy gave you all a brief introduction, but again, my little bit of my history. I'm a former MSD teacher. I spent 16 years in the classroom and then did some special ed administration. I've been with the co-ops. This is my third year with them, having a great time with that. But again, this is MSD classrooms and supporting those low incident students. That's where my passion is. So I'm glad you all are joining us today. I look forward to talking a little. So we're going to go over some instructional supports here. I'm going to close out my chat group. So the role of the paraprofessional, really is to provide supports to our students, whether that's one-on-one support, small group support. You may be supporting a larger group of students than that, or may not be set to a certain group, and maybe you're floating around a classroom. But ideally, we are supporting our special education students in all the areas that they need support to be successful. Also, a role of paraeducators to implement teacher-designed interventions. That means we're following the lead of our teachers that design these interventions and may coach us through how to implement those and what supports go with it. Of course, everybody in school, we're all assisting with classroom management constantly. And that seems to be one of the growing areas of needs in all of our schools. But again, we all assist with classroom management, whether that's with specific strategies through behavior interventions, or if we're just doing active supervision as part of our routine. But our number one thing that we do on a day-to-day basis is to support student independence and social integration. And again, that's that balancing act of when do we provide supports and when do we back off to promote independence. And as we get better moving through prompting strategies that we discussed last month, you start to gauge that I need to back up and promote independence, let them attempt or interact or engage independently as much as possible. And again, social integration is one of the greatest needs we have right now of how to support our students to be in social groups and be successful in social groups. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second, briefly about, what we should target in social skills or think about a little more strategically than we have in the past. So we'll cover some instructional strategies to support the most common disabilities but these strategies may or may not apply to all students. Every student's going to have individual needs, and we may change how we support one student versus a group of others. But again, these aren't one size fit all. A lot of these things are trial and error, but what we're going to talk about today are proven strategies and some of the more common ones we see at each level. But also to seek input from teachers you work with to discover additional information that will assist you in meeting the unique needs of your students. And I cannot preach this team approach enough that it is critical to the success of our programs that all the adults and professionals in that program are on the same page with clear direction. It makes a huge difference for the quality of instruction and programs for our students. So we're going to talk about some general instructional supports. And the first thing on there is visual aids and schedules. I cannot talk about visual aids and schedules enough, especially visual schedules. Well, all of them. I think these are one of the most common factors we see in our really successful programs. And it's also the first thing I noticed that's lacking in programs that need to improve a little. The visual schedules and visual aids have a tremendous impact on students, especially at the younger age, and especially all students with autism. We also need to have clear, concise instructions. Our expectations for students need to be clear and consistent. They need to understand what's expected of them, and we need to be able to communicate those expectations in a way that's going to help them understand that process. Another thing is our structured routines. We cannot build successful parts of a program in isolation. We have to have a clear structured routine of how we're going to move from activity to activity throughout the day with smooth transitions. Really, without that routine embedded, it's one chaotic transition that students may have trouble coping with, and getting that a little more systematic, that routine will play a big factor. And then those visual supports can come in and supplement that structured routine. We're also going to talk today a little bit about sensory-friendly environments and some common sensory integration strategies you can do to help a student, feel comfortable in these different settings. Maybe they need some sensory input to fully engage in an activity that's going to kind of relax them and help them feel, ready to start, ready to begin, ready to engage. Positive reinforcement goes along with every other evidence-based practice we use. Again, if we want to see an increase of wanted and successful behaviors, we have to positively reinforce those behaviors so they continue to occur. We all thrive off positive reinforcement. That doesn't matter if you're a kid, student, adult, older person, what setting you're in, every human thrives off positive reinforcement. Social stories and modeling, that's one of the strategies I use to really help with my expectations when students were unclear about expectations, or to help with potential problem areas that we may have pinpointed in the past. Again, I love the use of social stories. We'll talk briefly about that. And actually, I've been really engaged in using AI to help me generate some social stories now. I know Magic School AI is a great program that you can just type in the student needs, the situation, the behavior you're expecting, or maybe some of the problem areas you're seeing, and it will generate a great social story. Now, I'm not saying that social story is ready to run with. You'll probably have to revise it some, but it's a whole lot better than starting from scratch and doing that on your own as you go. I mean, it really is a good starting point, these AI-generated social stories. And then assistive technology is another huge instructional support. And oftentimes when I say assistive technology, the first thing that pops into your mind is the communication device, and that is a form of assistive technology, but it's not the only one. We have our high tech and our low tech. We may get into, maybe a student needs an adapted pencil grip to really be able to harness those fine motor skills to do some writing, or maybe it's a visually impaired student that needs some cover overlays and a magnifier. But assistive technology is not limited to communication, but it is one of our more commonly implemented forms of assistive technology in a school setting. So at the elementary level, we heavily rely on these visual supports. And again, I can't stress this enough. A program rich in visual supports, in my opinion, is one that's set up for success. If we've got a structured routine in place and then we have these clear visual supports to kind of supplement or reinforce that routine, it's just going to make all of our lives easier. And you think about these visual supports, they're constant and they're permanent. When you place a visual support on a student's desk, it's there forever. You can refer back to it. The difference is when we speak our expectations through spoken words only, there's a processing time, and then realistically those words may, float off and they mean nothing after we speak them. But if we've got a visual support to refer back to for expectations or maybe emotional regulation, those are a little more consistent and a lot less thought process than, understanding the spoken language and trying to interpret that and then act upon it. Now, visual timers for transition. Again, you have to have that clear routine with the transitions embedded and know they're coming up and maybe give notice of those. But the visual timers to me are a great tool to promote engagement or to see that a change is coming up, how long I have to make that change, and then when do I need to start with my expectations for the next part of our routine. But again, there's all kinds of visual timers. They're available. You can do online downloads. I have learned some things using visual timers. If I've got a student that, maybe he's earned some type of reward, and we're going to set a visual timer for how long the duration of that reward is going to last, and maybe it's 5 minutes. On a 1 hour visual timer, if we look down at the bottom, the ones that as you set the time larger, you see a larger space of red. But if you're only setting 5 minutes on a 1 hour visual timer, it doesn't seem like a lot of time. So I do like to vary those timers if you have the availability to do so. Maybe you've got a 10 or 15-minute timer. So when you set that, you see a large chunk of time represented on there. But again, these are great because students see that time decreasing and they start to prepare themselves for the upcoming transition or change. Emotional cards for expressing feelings. I do love these in elementary school because think how hard it is to communicate your emotions as an elementary student. Sorry, I had to take a drink of water. But when we start getting into identifying your emotions and expressing feelings, remember, we have to validate those student emotions because all emotions are normal. Anger is a normal emotion. Frustration is a normal emotion. Happiness is a normal emotion. It's how we cope with that we may have to intervene. For example, anger, it's totally acceptable for a 5-year-old to be angry. But in anger, is it okay to shred up papers and throw chairs? We have to teach how to cope with that acceptable emotion of being angry with acceptable behavior. So that's where the teaching component comes into, is identifying your emotions and what can I do when I feel that way. Another thing we often talk about in elementary settings are choice boards. Providing choice for how to engage in an activity or how you choose to participate in an activity could be one of the biggest factors in promoting engagement for our students. Because when we only give one option, if that's not the way they enjoy doing that activity, or maybe that's not the way they learn best, they're a lot less willing to participate in activities. But if you allow some choice based on their strengths within each activity, it gives some control to that student and makes them more willing to participate. So,
Kevin, with that, I just wanted to kind of say, as paraeducators in particular, you want to step back and kind of think, what is the purpose of the assignment? So again, if I'm just trying to get them to write their name, it doesn't matter if it's the purple marker that they use versus a pencil versus a red pen or even a crayon. Like, the purpose is for them to write their name. So don't fight the object, like give them that choice and that say in that, but writing their name is the expectation that you have. So really kind of think about which battle is worth kind of the fight and which one it's worth giving them the choice in.
and just a little about visual schedules. On the left, you see a longer visual schedule lined out with activities that a student may progress through during the day. I highly encourage one that outlines what the whole day activities look like, but you may need a separate visual schedule for times like your morning routine or carpet time, where the expectations may be a little different from other activities. So something to guide them through those process of just that one routine or activity. We also have sensory strategies that we can incorporate when our students start to show that they have sensory seeking or avoidance behaviors. Again, a lot of our students are overwhelmed with noise and clutter and just get a sense of being overwhelmed. So we can't offer quiet corners with soft seating and fidget toys. That's going to offer some multiple sensory input to reduce the noise there and get some tactile stimulation. But if you have students that may be really averse to sound input, and we see that often, students standing with their ears covered, there's noise canceling headphones out there that can greatly reduce the sound they're actually taking in. And there's some that, block out some of the background noise. There's earbuds that block out a certain amount of decibels, but allow some to pass through. So it's canceling out the overwhelming loud noises, but you can still hear conversation. But I will say most 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, younger students really don't like things in their ear. So I haven't had a lot of success with earbuds. Maybe in the upper grades, it would be a better option, but who knows? I mean, some students may enjoy those better than the over-the-ear headphones. Weighted lap pads are something we can do to increase engagement. I love this for students that are constantly up moving and pacing. If we want to have some time where we expect them to sit down, provide them some input and give them something to hold. I like the little puppy pad over here on the end. We use those in our preschools often. Students love them. They actually would raise their hand. Hey, can I sit with a puppy today? Can I sit with a puppy today? But it is really helpful. It's a reminder of the expectations for that and provide some sensory input that may be calming for the student. You may have students that need constant sensory breaks because they're seeking movement activities. Again, these are things that I would work with your teacher and occupational therapist and say, I think this kid needs some sensory breaks. What can we provide? What areas can we target? And how are we going to do that? But these are all different areas or ways that we can target that within a classroom setting. So middle school, we get into social support. And this is kind of a touchy subject in the autism world now, because I think it's the way we always set up social skills instruction. Typically, it was to teach a student how to act and behave under the typical expectations like a typical student. Now we are learning more and more about how to encourage success for our students with autism. We don't really want to teach typical expectations. We want to teach them how to cope with the barriers that they have in place in being successful. So, for example, practicing how to join a group activity during PE. If spoken language is not their best method of communication, teaching them how to go up and ask students, hey, can I play this game, may not be the best method. We may have to use visuals for that. We may have to have strategies of how they're going to interact with those students. But there's things we can do like social role playing exercises for peer conversations, lunch buddy programs, and social skills groups. But again, if we develop a social skills group to help students be successful, we want to teach them how to be successful under their strengths. So in academic modifications, as we move through the upper grades, we get a little bit more academic heavy. There's things for writing tasks, graphic organizers. And when I think about that, that is visually breaking down words in a way that it's easier to understand. But that is a great tool in writing tasks, graphic organizers. Organize your characters here, actions here. You can organize them in many different ways. But oftentimes, a lot of our assignments or activities are big, long chain tasks. And for example, we may say the student struggles going through the lunch line. But really, when we look at going through that lunch line, there's about 15 small steps going through it. We can break that down with the task analysis. This Goblin Tools is great, by the way. I did this exact scenario I'm talking about a little while ago. And it breaks it down into small steps, and we can identify exactly where we can provide supports and where we can back off and promote independence. But again, it's hard to say, this kid can't go through the lunch line. He gets overwhelmed. Well, there's a lot of processes through that. So it may be the actual getting to the cashier and doing that transaction that's the overwhelming part, or it may be at the front end of actually making the choices. And that's the area we can really step in and help. We have extended time for tests and assignments. And of course, we've got all of our traditional accommodations, readers, writers, but we also can embed the use of assistive technology. Text to speech has come a long way. I can't say enough about this. There's so many programs that do text to speech. There's the AI programs that do text to speech. You have a ton of options for that. And I do think that is our priority, because when we think about these accommodations and modifications, we want to try to get the student less dependent on human support. So if we back off from human support to assistive tech support, that's a huge step for the student in gaining independence.
All right, so we're going to talk about some things for some high school students. I know we've got a couple of people on here that serve that age group. So for high school students, looking at their executive functioning supports is really important. And some of you may be going, what are executive functioning? Like, I've never heard of that. That little graphic there really kind of gives a good overall view. It's that planning and organizing. It's that being able to set goals, being able to focus and pay attention, just getting started on a task, being able to manage my time. I mean, it's really all those kind of life skills that are needed to complete daily tasks. And again, as we're looking at that high school age students, that's really important because they're getting closer to exiting and maybe not having as much support as they do in a school setting once they reach adulthood. So we want to look at what supports can we give them that are going to be able to transition with them. So some great options are a digital calendar for assignment tracking. Again, most of us have our phone, which my screen's kind of blocking it out, that we keep up with our things, but teaching students how to use their phone, how to use their calendar on their laptops to keep up with those assignments, and kind of even break it down if it's a big assignment of what part am I going to have done by which date, which kind of goes into time management. There's some great time management apps out there. If anyone has used some that they think are really great, go ahead and drop them in the chat. I've heard about some, but I haven't found one that I personally love yet. Color-coded organization systems, again, kind of goes with the picture there at the bottom. Many of us, when we went through high school or even college, probably color-coded our folders and stuff. Math might have been in the blue folder, and reading was in the red folder, and science was in the yellow folder. For some of our students with autism, they don't think to necessarily organize that way, and so they might need to be taught that system. A study skills workshop might need to be done, and so that might be able to be part of a class or an after-school activity. I know I saw Henderson County High School is actually starting a great executive functioning group that's going to be happening after school. So just anything that's going to help them really kind of manage their time, remind them of those deadlines, help them process and stay focused on those tasks. Because again, we know in high school and post that it's not just 20 math problems anymore. It's something a little bit longer than that they're having to do. And then that kind of leads us into the next slide there of transition. So again, transition planning is huge for those high school age kids. So we need to start doing things like career interest inventories to see what potential careers they are interested in. And we have to be very careful that we have presumed competence in them, that we're not looking at a student and going, oh, they could never be XYZ. Like we need to find out what their interests are and help them explore that and help them find ways to achieve those goals, because we never know what they can truly do. Giving the opportunity to go out and do some job shadowing opportunities. I don't know if we've got any employment specialists on here today, but I know they do a lot of those type of things. But in the classroom, you guys also do a lot of life skills training. So again, these are those real life applications of measuring to be able to cook, being able to do the math needed for budgeting. We're still teaching money skills, but to be honest, I think we've got to take a little bit of a look back and go, how many of us actually carry cash anymore? Is it debit cards that we need to be working with? And I think for individual students, that might be different. For some students, cash is going to be a better thing for them, but those are going to be those conversations with the teacher and just kind of taking a step back and going, what skills do we need to work on to really help prepare them for life after high school? Making sure if they are going to go to some type of post-secondary college, that we are doing those visits and preparing for that, and just helping them to build those resumes, even for part-time employment, are all things that we can help with. Next slide, Kevin. Communication. It doesn't matter if they are in preschool or high school. Communication is a huge, huge, huge thing. Everyone deserves a voice, and I'm very, very passionate about that. All students should have access. If they're a speaking student, obviously we want them to speak, but even if they speak some, if they are not speaking the same number of words as their peers, they need some type of AAC support, whether it's a high-tech or low-tech support. Just because they can say 25 words doesn't mean they can effectively communicate. And so we need to give them those supports and access to things. Visual conversation starters. I knew a middle school teacher who did a great job. When her kids went to lunch, they had little strips, just like a question of the day, that they would take with them to help initiate those conversations and get conversations started with their peers during lunch. So that was a great little visual for them and gave them something to talk about. Also, be mindful that when students use AAC, we need to give them that wait time to really process. And to be honest, even if they're not an AAC user, many on the spectrum just need extra processing time to really digest everything you're saying. So before you respond, you want to give them that time to do that. But you see lots of examples here at the bottom. Most of them, of course, are more high tech because those are the most robust ways. But you kind of see the traditional iPad there in the first picture, where the student is using TD Snap or a similar program. Second picture, you actually see the student doesn't have motor control, and so he uses a stylus in his mouth to communicate on that board. And then you kind of see some mid-text like Go Talks and single switch buttons, which again are great options. And then you see some other visual supports, kind of like those conversation starters to help students.
I will say, as a paraprofessional, if you have students in your classroom that are using AAC, I would reach out to your teacher and SLP. If y'all haven't sat down, you don't really need to know how to program the device or anything like that, but really how to model that language and how to appropriately interact with the student, because we're not looking just for compliance and hitting buttons and identifying words. We want it to be for communication purposes. So
I'm glad Kevin said that, because even if they're not actively using their board, just that modeling, to be honest, is the most important thing as an adult support that you can do. And I always equate it to just like when babies are born. I mean, we start talking to them the moment that they are brought into this world. We are modeling language for them, but yet we don't expect them to talk until, they're closer to age 2. Do we kind of really expect that communication back? So again, model is huge. Behavior management, I know, is always a huge thing. Behaviors are frustrating because we always want it to stop immediately. Because again, Kevin and I have been there. Nobody wants to be kick, spit, bit, all those things. But number one, we need to keep in mind, just like managing behaviors. Most of these kids have deficits in these areas. So just like a reading deficit isn't going to change overnight, it's a long, slow, tedious process to teach them how to read. It's the same thing in changing that behavior and teaching appropriate expectations. But these strategies will definitely take you a long way. So again, most of our schools here in Kentucky are using PBIS, or positive behavior interventions and supports, throughout the building. Again, no matter what type of classroom you're in, make sure that you are following along with those. Token economy systems are a great way of kind of bringing in that reinforcer that Kevin talked about earlier, that has to be paired with every evidence-based strategy that we offer. So at the bottom, you see that little card that says, I can do it, and they're earning little stars. So for that example, it's just James can stay in his seat. So again, when you're first starting, if James literally cannot keep his bottom in his seat for more than 5 seconds, you might be giving him a star for every 5 seconds that he can do it. So yes, in just 25 seconds, he's earned his reinforcement, which in this case was lunch with a friend. Now, we're not going to stay at every 5 seconds because obviously that's not a very long expectation. But once he learns, oh, if I meet their expectations, I do get my reinforcement and they're consistent with that, then I can bump up to every 10 seconds, every 30 seconds, every minute, and just keep expanding that time. So it really depends on what the student's currently performing at, of where you're going to kind of set that expectation of earning whatever the token is. Like I said, here it was just stars. For my younger kids, I usually pick a character that they like, whether it's Bluey, whether it's Mario, whether it's superheroes, to kind of do it. My middle school, a lot of times I use a pop star artist, whether it's, oh, I just went blank on her name. Who's
Taylor.
dating Kelsey? Taylor
Taylor
Swift.
Swift. Come on now.
Hey, I remembered Kelsey's name. So you might use an icon with that. So again, it's finding something that they like and relate to, putting those visual expectations into a visual, kind of like Kevin said earlier, visuals stay, they're consistent. So again, you can put them on their desk to help remind them, but they just need to have it in a visual way. And remember, visuals can be pictures or words, depending on the age of the student. Calm down strategies.
I was
Go
going to
ahead,
say, we
Kevin.
have templates for these in our resource folder. So you'll be getting some different various templates that you can personalize.
Yes. And if you guys have something that you use that you think is great, share it with us and we can reshare it with the group. But calm down strategies, again, teaching them those deep breathing, counting things. So you kind of see like the pretzel breathing down there. But again, you want to have that visual posted in there. Next slide, Kevin, because we are basically at time. So I'm going to go fast. Make sure, I know Kevin already hit this, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. It's all about teamwork. None of us have all the answers. It's a lot of trial and error with our students, but we need to be all on the same page so that we are consistent. So you do need to try to have some regular team meetings where you're having those conversations of, hey, exactly how are we doing this? So that we're all implementing it the same way, which kind of goes back to prompting that we talked about last week, that we are talking about the progress of the student. We're being consistent with implementing those IEP goals. We're looking for professional development opportunities. So hopefully you guys are enjoying these 30-minute sessions that we are providing for you all. But just really having that ongoing conversation as a team is going to be really, really important to make sure your student is successful. Some other resources and stuff, because again, we know these are very quick sessions that we are doing. Affirm, which is the Autism Focused Interventions Resource and Modules website, has some wonderful modules and they're specific for paraprofessionals. So you can go through there, make a free account. You'll get certificates at the end of each thing. Look for other local workshops and conferences. Again, the co-op does a lot of training. So if your schools will allow you to come to those are great. Kentucky Autism Training Center, we've got a virtual book study getting ready to start here in about 2 weeks of 10 things every student with autism wishes you knew. Look at your professional organizations like the Council of Exceptional Children. They've got their conference that's going to be this November, but you just really want to keep your eyes open. You guys are a very valuable part of the team. Please don't ever say, I'm just an instructional assistant. I'm just a paraprofessional. I'm just whatever, because we cannot do this work without you all. You are a huge part of the team. So again, KATC, or Kentucky Autism Training Center, we have our Facebook page, our Instagram page. We do have a YouTube page that these videos are being posted on, and there's lots of other videos. So I would really encourage you to follow us on social media. The information about the book study is posted on there. Next one, Kevin. So again, we thank you guys for being here. We know these 30 minutes go very, very quickly. Our next session that you will need to sign up for, and Kevin will send that out soon, will be October 14th. Our anticipated topic, based on the survey that you all completed, is going to be building student independence. So I'm excited about that one, because that should always be our goal. You will be receiving an email before the end of today that will give you the resource folder. So lots of examples from things today. It will also have the evaluations for Kentucky Autism Training Center and WKEC, because our bosses need to know that we did do these 30-minute trainings and that you guys are finding them valuable, so that we can continue to do them. So please fill those out, and then that will also get your certificate of attendance. If you guys have any questions, we will stay on for just a moment, or you can drop it in the chat.
We do have a
Otherwise,
survey to fill out, though. I'm going to stop sharing.
okay,
My Zoom, and I apologize for my delay at the beginning. It's kind of put us a little behind, but
that's all.
Tracy had a link for feedback in the chat. Do you see it?
I'm looking.
I can add it. I think it's still my last saved message. So there we go.
Got it. Yep, there it popped up.
Guys, and I apologize about the delay. I'm telling you, a 6-hour training is so much less stressful than a 30-minute one. Is trying to get the important stuff in the time. It's often a challenge, but you have our contact information. So